Black history is American history. I heard an educator make this statement just a few days ago. We celebrate Black history all year round. February is just the anniversary. And it's fair to say that our guest speaker has made that celebration his lifelong work. I'm really honored to introduce him to you. So today we have Ron Harrill. He's a historian, writer, and lecturer on the history of Africa and the African people. He's the author of 3 books, 2 plays, and over 200 poems. And these books are for sale today, so if you want to come and check them out and purchase them after the speech, you're more than welcome to. He has authored an international award-winning book, Makeda, Queen of Sheba. His latest historical-based book, Children of Genesis, the Black Nations and the Old Testament, continues to gain popularity. Mr. Harrill has traveled to West Africa, North Africa, and Israel for study and research. He's married to Denise Harrill, and they reside in Shelby, North Carolina. They're the proud parents of 3 sons. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Ron Harrill.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Is it good morning? Good morning. It is good morning. Thank you for the invite, Sister Wanda. Where are you at, Sister Wanda? Okay. Thank you so much for the invite. Becky, thanks for the introduction. I'm going to spend some time with you talking about the passion that I have for history. I think Becky was asking me, is that all I do? No, in a former life, I spent 33 years with Wachovia Bank in a former life. And before that, I did 6 years in accounting in Los Angeles, California. So I did 39 years in the corporate world. Shut it down. If you haven't made it in 39, you're not gonna make it. So that was it. That was a good thing. But even when I was in the banking and the accounting world, history was something that, well, just the gift of words. My early teachers always shared with my mom. He's either gonna go with numbers or words because he can do both. So that's what my first elementary teacher told, and she was right. I can do either one. But in terms of history, and I know that's what we're here for, and I'll give you just a couple of stories on. Hopefully you'll pick up on the analogies on this one. Why history is important. Let me talk to you about me and my doctor, and maybe you can relate to this. When I started my relationship with my doctor, and every year I go to my doctor, he will not touch me until I fill out these history papers. He is that concerned about knowing about my history. I have to answer, I gotta answer all these questions. Have you ever did this? Have you ever did this? Have you ever done this? And not only does he want to know my history, he wants to know my mother's history, he wants to know my father's history, he asked me about my grandparents, my brother, and my sister, because to him, my history is that important, because he's trying to figure out my past so that he can help me with my current evaluation, and then we might take a glimpse into the future. But I hope you understand that's just a simple analogy, but that is what history is all about. Is you're always looking at the past so that you can appreciate people who don't necessarily look like you. The world doesn't, it's one-dimensional to think that everybody looks like you and the world operates, no matter what color you are. We all are independently, but we are dependent on each other. That's the joy of humanity, and that's what I do with my books and my writings. I'm always trying to improve humanity. That's the first thing I'm pushing is humanity. We're either gonna go up as a group, or we're gonna crash and burn as a group, because at the end, it's not gonna be one little single group standing out with everybody else crashing and burning. That's just not the way it works. Now, today, I'm gonna take you on a journey through the Buffalo Soldiers, and what I would ask you to do is, when I talk, history it's got several elements to it, but history is not supposed to make people feel comfortable. Now, I don't know where that fallacy came up that I want to live in a world where history makes me feel good all the time. That's not the role of history. History sometimes, if you're really honest, sometimes it's going to make you feel comfortable. Sometimes it's going to make you feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it's going to make you sad. Sometimes you're going to be glad. Sometimes you're going to be mad. And sometimes you're going to be angry, because history is the recording of events that have already happened. And there's really, you can't run from it. It's there. You can filter it. You can manipulate it and things like that. But history is just like my doctor. History is for all of us to understand what has happened so that we don't make the same mistakes again. If you get nothing else, history is a teacher. That's what history is. It teaches us what we did good, what we did bad, and what was ugly. That's what history is all about. So today, all I want you to do is be in a teaching moment. Don't think, oh boy, he's gonna make us feel bad, or somebody's gonna, nah, we ain't gonna be feeling bad today. We're gonna talk about some things, but it's things that we need to talk about so that we can improve and that we can be better and that we can understand the past so that we don't replicate those mistakes. So, this speech that I'm going to speak about now, my expertise is ancient history. Every book I write is on ancient history. The definition of ancient history is the events before the birth of Christ. I've got 3 books, and I don't write any books on modern history. Modern history is okay, but it's that ancient stuff. Some of us just love that ancient stuff. Now, the reason I like it as a African American or person of black origin, there are 6. First of all, the black nations, the black race has more sustained recorded history on this earth than any other group. We're the only group that has 8,000 years of recorded history. Nobody else goes back. We've got 2,000 years since the birth of Christ, but we got 6,000 years of history recorded before the birth of Christ. So we're the only nation or group of people that has 8,000 years, but we don't even know we have 8,000 years. So don't worry about that, because people in my family don't even know we got 8,000 years of recorded history. So the reason that I read do the ancient things is there's 6,000 years to research before the birth of Christ and only 2,000 years after the birth of Christ. So I just put on my accountant hat. I got 3 times more data over here to look at than I do over here. So that's why I'm kind of intrigued. There's just a wealth of information. You can pretend like that was important. Just give me the illusion that meant something. Now, today we're going to talk about a subject that I'm probably going to lecture only one time, but I'm scheduled to lecture on the Buffalo Soldiers, because all of my other lectures are on the books and things like that. But when Wanda called me and we were trying to work up a subject, I said, well, Wanda, let me just pull up one off of my inventory shelf and let me do the Buffalo Soldiers, because this is near and dear to my heart, and I at least want to do it one time since I'm on the lecturing circuit right now. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, the book I'm going to use is, because us historians, we got historians we like too, and here's historians that we don't tell them that we really don't care for. But this guy is named William Lecky, and I'm going to be lecturing from his book. And no, he's not a black historian, he's a white historian. Okay, because I'm only looking for the best. Don't care what color they are. I'm only looking for the best. He was a military man in World War II, and he got intrigued with World War II black soldiers. He said, I know they're not getting treated fairly, but they sure are brave and they sure are courageous. So he started asking questions about what their thoughts were, and lo and behold, he stumbled onto the Buffalo Soldiers, and from there, William Lecky, who was a college professor in Ohio, he spent years researching the military records of the Buffalo Soldiers. So that's one reason that I use this book, because he just spent years, and I spend years too, so I can relate to it. But just the fact that he would find a way and have the passion to study the military records, because he says somebody has got to tell this story, and they got to tell it with pride. So in the early 1970s, he published this book. So this is the 3rd one. I wore out the first one. I read it and I went through the pages. So I bought it 3 times. So I hope his family likes that. But let's start on it. So I'm going to be structured with the military stuff, and I'm going to try to. Now, he put me to sleep Any veterans in here? I mean, he's all into this military stuff. So sometimes he just puts me to sleep, but I have to hang in there with him because he's good. Now, the backdrop on this story is 1866, okay? So that's where we're gonna start, the year 1866. During the Civil War, due to the Union Army losing so many men, at one point during the Civil War, the Union Army decided we have got to let the blacks, the Negroes, into the military because we just don't have enough men to sustain this war. So given that was one of the catalysts for allowing black men to enter the Union Army to fight in the war between the states. Now, according to the U.S. military records, 180,000 black men served in the Union Army in the war between the states. 180,000. Of that number, 37,300 black men died in the war between the states. So I'm just saying that because some of these paradigms about blacks don't do this or blacks don't do that, 37,300 black men died during the war between the states. Not always on the battlefield, because if you ever study some of the wars, some of the men died from cholera, dysentery, and things like that. But the official record count is 37,300. 16 black men won the United States Congressional Medal of Honor during the Civil War. Now, you know, in the 1860s, for a black man to win the Congressional Medal of Honor, he had to be a strong fighter. That was no joke. And the other thing, I wish more young guys were here, but I want to leave this with you. In terms of America, there has never been a war, not one single war, that black soldiers did not fight for this country, defend this country, and defend that American flag. There's never been a single war that we didn't fight in for the good of America. Y'all get that one? Not one, not one. So, here's the dilemma. It's 1866, the war is over, and Congress has got this big deal. What are we gonna do with these Negro soldiers now that the war is over? What are we gonna do? Because we needed them to fight the war. Will we let them be in the military during peaceful times? That was a big debate, because the debate got so big that it went to the Senate floor. And the United States Senate debated on whether or not black soldiers deserved to be in the United States Army starting in the year 1866. Because many of them believed that nope, we don't want them, we don't want to be around them, nothing like that. So, the debate went something like this. I know a lot of Southern congressmen, and we're from the South, so we can tell the truth. They didn't want us in the Army. And they made it loud and clear. Nope. And it wasn't just the Southerners. There were others in there too. So it got so intense, they had to get a vote. Did the black man deserve to be in the Army? This is the criteria that they were debating, if you can believe it. They were debating whether a black soldier had the discipline, the intelligence, the bravery, and the fortitude to serve as a soldier. They questioned our intelligence, our bravery, and our fortitude, and our courage, just to see if we had the criteria to even be in the United States Army. But thankfully, in 1866, the United States passed special legislation that said, yes, blacks could serve in the military, but they couldn't serve alongside white soldiers. So they made separate black cavalry troops, especially the 9th and the 10th that we're going to talk about. And then there were 4 more infantry troops that became the coalition of the black cavalry in 1866. But they went further. They said, we'll let them in the Army, but all of the officers have to be white men. No black men. All the officers have to be white. And the second criteria was that the officers had to be former military veterans who served with experience in the Civil War. So they had to be white, they had to be with military experience, and they had to have the Civil War in their background. So it was General Grant who commissioned two. He commissioned Edward Hatch from Ohio, who willingly served. He said, I'll gladly take it. And Benjamin Grierson from Illinois. So Hatch went with the 9th Cavalry, newly formed, and Grierson went with the 10th Cavalry. Now, the 9th Cavalry was sent to Louisiana and the 10th for training, and the 10th Cavalry was sent to Fort Leavenworth, out, I think that's Kansas, for training. Now, let's talk about the 9th first, and then we'll talk about the 10th. So here's a group of men who enlisted in the Army, why did they enlist in the Army? Most of these men just wanted to better themselves. They wanted to fit in with the American dream, and they wanted to find ways to find economic support for their families. That's what they wanted to do. They just wanted to fit in. They wanted to serve, they wanted to wear that military uniform, and that's pretty much why they did it. Now, when the 9th Cavalry went to Louisiana, way down in the South, y'all know that wasn't a good experience in 1866. That was not too good. When they first got there, one of the top-ranking military generals in Louisiana, Eugene Carr, made this statement. He says, black men will not make good soldiers. I don't know why they made this decision. I am totally opposed to all of these black cavalry troops. That's a direct quote from Eugene Carr, who was one of the top military guys in Louisiana. Now, Grierson and Hatch had a problem finding lieutenants and other officers to serve with them, because initially the other lower ranking military people said, we're not serving with those Negro black troops. We're not going to do it because it's going to be a stain on our military records if we do that, and we're going to get tremendous setback and peer pressure from our peers if we cross that line, and we do that. So there was a lot of resistance to getting white lieutenants and folks like that to join these troops. Now, when the word circulated that blacks could actually enlist, there was just an open door, and a lot of black men enlisted. I was surprised that there was a lot of ex-Civil War black soldiers living in Louisiana, in the Baton Rouge area. I just thought that was intriguing, but they were located in Baton Rouge, and a lot of them immediately joined up, and because they were facing unemployment. They were veterans, but they were Union veterans living in Louisiana, so they were not getting employment. So the initial pay scale, according to William Leakey, was set at $10 a month for the black soldiers, and the white soldiers were getting $13 a month. But the blacks did not complain. They did not complain. They were glad to be in the Army. So one of the biggest, and we're going to go through some obstacles. That's why if I could ever get this speech to our youth to show them how you think you got it bad, look at how these guys kept overcoming all of these obstacles that they had to deal with. One of the biggest obstacles facing the 9th Cavalry, 90% of the men, 90% were illiterate. They couldn't read. Now, you may say, couldn't read? We're talking 1866, 1 or 2 years after slavery, when before that it was even against the law for anybody to teach a black slave or anybody like that how to read. So you got to get the feel for, in the South, a lot of these men were just flat out illiterate. They could not read. So you got to imagine that the officers went like, what in the world are we going to do? We got a bunch of people that we can't even hardly communicate some of the information to. But they kept pressing on. The men were so strong, they just wanted to figure out what could they do to serve this country. Some of the few men who could read, at night, under the lanterns, they would have little reading classes to try to teach as much as they could. And they were doing that all through the time, just trying to overcome that obstacle. But slowly, some of the white officers changed their mind, and some really good white officers said, yeah, I'm going to join because I think this is the right thing to do. So slowly, they started developing, slowly they started going. Now, the 10th Cavalry at Fort Leavenworth took a different route. They decided we're going to slow down the enrollment because we're looking for more ex-black Union troops to come in here. We're going to slow down the illiteracy, and we're just going to recruit like crazy to see how many ex-soldiers can we get. So that's what the 10th Cavalry did. Now, the 10th Cavalry was assigned, and I'm going to use this term, Indian and Native American. And one of the things about this speech is the sensitivity that you have to pit black soldiers against Native Americans when both of those groups were struggling in America. So I do wish at some point that we would correct some of the things with the Native Americans. So I'll just say that, and I'm gonna go on. Now, the 10th Cavalry out in Kansas, the Kansas Pacific Railroad that Hollywood always shows with all those white cavalry troops doing all that coverage, that's not really true. The Kansas Pacific Railroad was protected a lot by these Buffalo Soldiers. That was one of their initial jobs, was the railroad was being built, we gotta protect them, do whatever you can. So that was one of their first assignments. One of their second assignments was the incoming settlers coming across the country settling. So that was one of their next things, was anytime they could protect those soldiers. Now, the wagon trains, here's another contrary to what Hollywood has. And I look at the Western movies because people my age, that's what we do, right? Retired people, we look at Western movies. But all of the Western movies show the white cavalry troops escorting the wagon trains. That's not true. That's not true either. In Kansas and that area, a lot of those wagon trains were escorted by the Buffalo Soldiers. Now, some people say, well, how did they get this name, the Buffalo Soldiers? The 10th Cavalry, in certain combats, and I'll talk a little bit about the combats, the Native Americans gave them the name the Buffalo Soldiers because the Native Americans, when they were in combat with the black troops, said the hair on the back of our heads looks like the hair on the back of a buffalo. And that's how they became, because the buffalo was considered a superior animal in Native American culture. Okay? And apparently when they were fighting us, it was some pretty strong fights. So this was a compliment that, we're going to give you a high-ranking name, and we're going to call you the Buffalo Soldiers. So the 10th Cavalry, and it was a compliment, it was a thing of respect. The 10th Cavalry took on the name, and that's where they became called the Buffalo Soldiers. And pretty soon, if you look at the insignia of the 10th Cavalry, you'll see that it does carry the Buffalo Soldier. And later on, the 9th Cavalry, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, also took on the name because they knew it was a name of respect. So that's where the name Buffalo Soldiers came from. Now, a lot of the surveyors that were surveying the uncharted parts of the America, because remember, in this time, in the 1860s, a lot of America, we didn't know a whole lot about. Native Americans did, but we didn't. So one of the things that the government did was they gave them the duties of charting the uncharted territories. But here's one of the tough challenges for the 10th Cavalry. And William Leckey records this over and over and over. And it's hard to digest, but it happened. For some reason, the United States government decided to give the 10th Cavalry, the All Blacks, just only second-rate materials. Now, they're fighting for the country, just like the white cavalries are, but they never gave the black troops the same first-rate equipment that they gave the white troops. So according to records, their food was secondary, their supplies were secondary, their medical support was secondary, their rifles were secondary, and there are reports that most of the Buffalo Soldiers horses were 10 years old. They were castaways from the 7th, the 4th, and the 5th, who always got the new horses, and then they recycled the old horses to the black troops. So that's something that William Leckie said, I just don't understand how a military can treat, in times of heavy conflict, one group one way and another group one way, but they did. And but the Buffalo Soldiers kept moving forward. Now, I'm going to show you just a little bit on some military conflicts. This morning, I made a change to this speech, and I took out a lot of the intense military stuff and a lot of the intense fighting this morning, because one, I don't think this is the right time to be talking about guns and ballots on a college campus. With everything going on, I just didn't know who was going to be here. So it's the same speech, but I toned down some of the things that I would have told you about in the intense conflicts. I don't have to talk to you about them. I can kind of let you know them, but here's one that I wanted to tell you about that happened. This was the first time that the 10th Cavalry was tested. And I guess the Native Americans said, we're gonna test them because we know they're rookies. So we're gonna test them, see what they got. So in August of 1867, near Fort Hays, Kansas, there were 35 members of the 10th Cavalry out on patrol, and they got surrounded by 75 members from the Cheyenne Nation. And according to the military archive records, the Buffalo Soldiers found themselves surrounded. They dismounted their horses, and they found cover, and they said they fought like wildcats for 6 straight hours. And I don't know what this really means, but the Buffalo Soldiers loved hand-to-hand fighting. They loved close combat. Maybe it's because they've got all those second-rate rifles and some of them didn't fight. I don't know. But they loved close fighting. They were known for close fighting. So in this one, there was a lot of close fighting, and then lo and behold, they didn't have enough ammunition. So they decided, we're gonna have to shoot our way out of this. So they shot their way out of it, and they survived it. But according to the records, the lieutenant said, okay, y'all are looking good. You're really looking good. I like your bravery. Because remember now, everybody's questioning our bravery. All of the United States Cavalry is looking at these guys. So here's another one. Now remember, United States Congress questioned our fortitude, our bravery, our intelligence, and courage. In 1868 in the Badlands, Brad, where's Badlands? Is that the Dakotas? Yeah. Okay. It's my assistant. Okay, it's my consultant out here, Brad. Okay, I just met him a few minutes ago. He didn't know he was going to have a job. Okay, the Badlands, the Dakotas. The Badlands they were so fierce that the United States was having a problem getting the U.S. mail through the Badlands. Carriers were just it was bad. It was really bad. So after a few months, the white cavalry said, we don't want this job. It's too rough. It's too tough. So guess who they gave it to? The Buffalo Soldiers, who supposedly didn't have courage. So the Buffalo Soldiers didn't complain. They said, if you want us to take that job, we'll take it. So they graciously started carrying the mail in the Badlands because they were, once again, they knew the world was looking at them, and in this book, they knew they could not fail. Because if they failed as being military men, it was going to be a rippling effect for years across where the black men could ever get in the military again. But there's one story that I always cling to in this speech, and it's a private guy named Fillmore Roberts. His story is burned in my brain. In 1868, Fillmore Roberts was given some ultra important papers to take to Fort Gibson in Oklahoma. And he was clearly told, these papers have got to reach. These are just super important papers. So he left his post, he strapped the mail on his back, but he never made it. He never made it. So after a month or two, he was officially classified as a deserter. He had let the army down.
However, in the spring, when the snows started thawing out and all the rivers started subsiding, a patrol group spotted a body that was wedged in the brushes in the river, and they spotted a body. And they knew it was a soldier, but they didn't know who it was. And once they recovered the body, it was identified as Fillmore Roberts because that strap was strapped on the back, still strapped. He tried to cross that river in the swollen times, trying to get that mail across, and he just didn't make it. So the river caught him, and I guess it swept him in the brushes, but his body laid there. But that U.S. mail strap was still on his back. So he tried to do the best he could. But that was the dedication that those guys had. They for 4 or 5 years, the colonels started writing those letters about those supplies, but they said, now you've got to give us better horses. You've got to give us better horses. We cannot fight these battles with 10 and 15-year-old horses. And our old artillery that sometimes blows up on us when we're trying to fire this stuff. Here's 2 letters that I want to read you. One is from Captain Carpenter from Camp Supply in 1870. This is an official report, complaint report, that he did for the 10th Cavalry. Captain Carpenter wrote this letter. He says, the 10th Cavalry is getting old and worn out horses that are throwaways from the favorite brat 7th Cavalry. Okay? Some of these weary horses died within the days of reaching our post. Since the first mounts in 1867 until now in 1870, the 10th Cavalry has received nothing but broken down horses and old repaired equipment. I'm willing to come to Congress to testify fully for these injustices. Signed, Captain Carpenter, Camp Supply, 1870. Now, Edward Hatch, that I mentioned, that was in charge of the 10th Cavalry, he sent this letter from Fort Sill, Oklahoma. He says, I went out to inspect some of my troops, and upon arrival, I found their morale very high, and their spirit even higher among the troops. And although the new troops were still in training, they were working hard. However, I reviewed their equipment and their horses, and I was shocked. Most of these horses were old cast-offs from other troops. Yet the men took excellent care of the horses as if they were babies. They treated them with excellent care. He says most of the military was so old, I wouldn't even fire. And the ammunition supplies were so low, I don't know how they make it. So these are some of the obstacles. But within 4 years of enlistment, the 10th Cavalry, they had learned to trust each other. And they taught themselves that teamwork, Omar, teamwork was going to get them through. Everybody had to carry their weight. And I'm going to say this about guns, and I'm going to tone it back. One of the ways to overcome the obstacles of low ammunition, it was a requirement in the 10th Cavalry, you had to be an expert shot. We don't have a lot of bullets, Brad. You got to make every bullet count. So that was their mentality, is if they won't give it to us, you have got to be an expert shot, because we just don't have a lot of supplies. So they taught themselves again, how do we overcome these obstacles? Now, according to history, the 10th rarely retreated in battles. Now, it's not a joke, and Omar, it ain't bad. But the horse is so old, how could they retreat? They could not run nobody. So they had to fight. But they were known, they wouldn't retreat. And here's a letter that a retiring officer wrote in 1879 of what he thought about the men in the 10th Cavalry. This is Captain Brigadier General W.H. Penrose from his own files. He says, to the officers and soldiers of the 10th U.S. Cavalry, having been relieved from command of this division, I have an opportunity that was given to me to bid you farewell, and I'm going to take it. You started from this post on an important mission with many disadvantages. Your horses were just so poor, but yet you marched into unknown country. You encountered severe storms, rains, snows, intense cold. You didn't have the right outfits for such weather. Your horses died every day. I saw it. You yourself suffered intense cold and many frostbitten hands and feet, but you pushed on. You pushed on, undaunted and undismayed, still anxious to meet the opportunities and the enemy. Few commands have ever been called upon to endure more than you have and to perform the duties, and no one has done them better than you. To the men and the officers, I humbly thank you, and I give you my best. Now that's a retiring officer who says, I know that you overcame all this stuff. Now I'm gonna give you a real quick snapshot on the 9th Cavalry. That was the 10th Cavalry in Kansas. The 9th Cavalry from Louisiana was sent initially to Texas. They were sent to the Rio Grande. Now, why were they sent to the Rio Grande? The Rio Grande in Texas was the roughest, toughest, cruelest, most honorary part of the western frontier was the Rio Grande. A lot of white troops wanted nothing to do with the Rio Grande. They would go there and they would serve for a few months, and as soon as they could get put somewhere else, they would take it. But the United States Army, after questioning the fortitude and the bravery, said, we're gonna send the 9th Troop to the Rio Grande. It was just, they said it was just chaotic, everything down there. There were 3 cavalry troops that were sent to the Rio Grande, and the Black 9th was the only group that had to stay there permanently. They had to stay there for almost 5 consecutive years. The United States Army told them, we changed our mind. You cannot get your yearly furloughs. You can't go home and see your family or nothing, because we need you so much. We need you so much. You have got to stay in Texas until we solve some of the problems. So the men of the 9th had to stay out there for almost 4 or 5 years without seeing their families to defend our country. Now, a lot of them were assigned to build the forts. That's another thing. When you look at these Western movies and you see those forts being up, nope, it wasn't those white soldiers. It was the black soldiers building the forts. They built, according to Lecky, at least 20 of the large forts that are in the West. Now, there was a big battle. I'm gonna get this with them and tone it back a little bit. When they got there, there was a combined group that hated the army. It was Native Americans, it was Indians, Mexicans, white outlaws, and just desperados. 900 of them gathered together at Fort Lancaster to try to ambush the 9th Cavalry, but it didn't work. According to the military records, it said the Black 9th Cavalry came out with such great enthusiasm, and they fought so hard and steady. They lost a few men, but they held their ground. This is what the San Antonio paper wrote in that year. They said, we owe a special thanks and great appreciation to the black troops who fought with such bravery and courage while doing their duties. Lieutenant George Albee won the Congressional Medal of Honor for that battle. Now, go back. Now, they questioned us in 1866. Did we even have bravery? Now we got black troops winning the Congressional Medal of Honor. Now, military records said in the middle of the battle, once again, they went to the hand-to-hand combat. That's what they like to do. They went hand-to-hand combat. They defeated the enemy. Then they chased the enemy and fought the enemy again. So they didn't even want the enemy to go. Now, one of my favorite guys is a guy who's about this tall. His name is Emmanuel Stance. He's 5 feet tall. He had a Napoleon complex. Y'all know what that is? The short men. Yeah, I'm close to one of them guys. But yeah, Emmanuel Stance, he had a Napoleon complex. But he was a member of F Troop, and he was a leader of one of the scouting troops. And I don't know why he did this, but at least 3 or 4 recorded times. If the enemy was over there and he was over here, he would say, let's just charge him. Let's just go as hard as we can straight at him. And he did that many times, and he kept telling them, Emmanuel, that's not a good maneuver. You just don't go straight at the enemy like that. But he did it several times, and his military career was strong enough. Emmanuel Stantz, recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was that strong of a soldier. Now, once again, the Texas was just so tough, and a lot of the 9th Cavalry in Texas, according to the records, lived in isolation because they were out in uncharted regions where Americans had never been, trying to find water holes, trying to find passages for the people to get across, and they lived in isolation and just wilderness. And sometimes it says that they had to stay in the saddle for 2 and 3 months, 7 days a week, trying to serve the duties. They didn't get all the credit, but in Texas, there was so much horse and cattle thievery. Ranches were being burned, post office, government buildings were being burned, court systems were being overrun. The Mexican government was always overrunning parts of Texas. Just fierce battles everywhere. But once again, the United States relied on the Buffalo soldiers to do the best they could to hold Texas together. Now, they weren't angels or anything like that, but they had a mission. They had a mission. They just wanted to fit in. They wanted to be Americans, and they wanted to show America that the black man deserved to wear that cavalry uniform. So, in closing, in 1870, according to another official report that went to the United States Congress, Captain Morrow said, the men of the 9th Cavalry have been asked to march over 1,000 miles of uncharted, unknown territories, and the last 200 miles, you wouldn't believe the harshness. I cannot speak too highly of the conduct of the men under my command. They're always cheerful and ready. They're brave and under the severest hardships and under the severest food supplies. This is how he closed his letter. The Negro soldier does not know fear and is capable of great endurance. That's a big change from 1866 when they said we couldn't do this stuff. So in summary, from 1867 to 1872, the 9th Cavalry encountered the 5 hardest years of combat service of all U.S. cavalry troops. From 1873 to 1877, the military records show that the 9th and the 10th Cavalries had numerous records and dedications of services. In 1877, the 10th Cavalry lost only 18 men to desertion. You think, what is that? That's a big deal in 1877. In the next year, they set the all-time low. In 1880, the 10th Cavalry established the all-time military low of only 5 desertions in a year. No other cavalry troop came close to that record. Now, in the Old West days, alcoholism and chronic drunkenness plagued a lot of the troops, right? A lot of the white troops. But not the black troops. They couldn't do that. Yeah, they weren't angels, but there were certain things that they knew they couldn't do because America was looking at them. Yeah, they drank and stuff like that, but they couldn't get away with some of the things that other people got away with. Now, William Leckey, at the end of his book, says, I have searched the extensive records of the militaries and all of the Western newspapers I could find. One can search the dusty archives and records in vain and will not find instances where a detachment, a company, battalion, or regiment of Buffalo soldiers who ever ran away or failed to do their duties under the fire of action. So, in closing, all I'm just trying to do is share information with you about things that we don't know, but things we ought to know that may break down some of the paradigms about the Old West, about history, and that we all are in this thing together. The Old West took a lot of people, so that is my report. And I appreciate your attention, but this is why, Wanda, I pulled this off the shelf, because I had to bring it on these guys. These guys should be taught in public schools. These guys should, if there's one thing that should be taught about how to overcome obstacles, how to be a proud American, how to do your job, how not to complain, and how to get, I think 16 of them won the U.S. Congressional Medal of Honor. 16. So in closing, is Zach here? Zach, you mind? Now Zach dropped a bombshell on me yesterday. Could you stand up and tell him about what you shared with me? Can I put you on the spot? Y'all, if you ever with me, I'm gonna draft you. If I see you, I'm gonna draft you. He dropped a historical bombshell. Zach is from the Earl Scruggs Center. So could you just kind of tell him what you sent me yesterday?
Yeah, so we actually have a Buffalo soldier buried here in Shelby. He served from 1914 to 1919 with the 10th Cavalry. Wow. And what they mainly were in charge of was fighting back the Mexican military that was working their way into New Mexico during that period. And he's buried over in what's called East Side Cemetery, which is off Weinberger Street across from the Ester Mill. So just something to keep in mind that it's a local history too for us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Zach. He sent that to me yesterday. I said, a Buffalo soldier in Shelby? Are you serious? So thank you so much for sharing that. And
Charles Parks was his name.
yeah, and I looked at what you sent me. He died in 1936.
Yes.
Yeah, but y'all know the cemetery. You know where on Lineberg Street near that car wash, across from old Escamilla. Yeah, he's in there, an actual Buffalo soldier, and it has on his tombstone 10th Cavalry.
He has a military headstone that was applied for.
Hey, I mean, so thank you. So that's the joy of sharing history. Yeah, it is a big wow. Yeah, he's a Parks. So now we got to figure out who's in the Parks family. Somebody in the Parks family probably needs to check on him just to see, But once again, that's it. Do you have any questions? I will stay if anybody wants to look at the books, because my coaches always tell me,